I think they got the
magnitude.
magnitude wrong, because, yeah, unless it hasn't come through yet. So,
Dr. Jones, can you explain the shake alert again? Because some people just got the initial report that it, quote unquote, wasn't working. Can you explain again that?
Let's let the USGS handle that one.
Yeah. So the system worked.
Oh, that was a 5.1.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the system, the shake alert system, worked both on the USGS side and on the shake alert LA side. The reason why alerts or notifications didn't go out to LA County is that the threshold for shaking was set above what the estimated shaking would be. So it was just the way that the system was designed. And in fact, the same thing happened again tonight. My understanding, the alerts did not go out on Shake Alert LA. A magnitude that was estimated with a early warning system was 6.2. So the initial magnitude estimate was too low. Consequently, the intensities were below that threshold. So the system is not perfect, but again, what was experienced here in Pasadena, LA area, these were not damaging ground motions. What's going on up in Ridgecrest, those are damaging ground motions. So those folks are really feeling it.
Robert, what's the chance of another large quake like this, or even larger tonight?
Well, as Dr. Jones had said, there's a 5% chance that this could be followed by an even larger quake. And well,
the number of 5% is usually for a few days. The most likely time is within a day, which is what, of course, we just saw, 30 hours or something, 36 hours.
Yeah, and in fact,
earlier that you don't recall of any earthquake sequence where a 7.1 was followed by a greater earthquake.
Oh, no, I just don't remember one that's had this in California that's had that series. There are places elsewhere in the world. There was a magnitude 8.5 that was a foreshock to a 9.5 in Chile. So there is nothing about the magnitude that says it can't be a foreshock.
Right, but in California, along this, in the seismicity of this state, you've never seen anything follow a 7.1.
Boy. Yeah, but that doesn't mean...
We haven't, we have in Nevada. We have in Nevada the Fairfield earthquakes.
Yeah. The takeaway here, though, is that as we have just seen between yesterday and today, quakes that we say are main shocks can't actually be foreshocks to larger quakes. So,
and we won't know till it does or doesn't happen.
Yeah, right. Yeah. There's a small percentage.
Is the 7.1 the same depth for the most part as the 6.4?
Yeah. Well, it's 17 kilometers.
Yeah. So it's the epicenter is a little bit deeper. We do have geologists out in the field. We haven't got reports back, but they'll be able to go out and document.
But also remember.
You said 5 to 10 miles?
So that's the 10 miles, right? It's 10 miles down, whereas the one yesterday was more like 6 or 7 miles down. However, a bigger earthquake also involves a larger fault, so it still may very well. Probably this is coming to the surface.
Yeah.
Is there?
What you're really worried about is, are we going to trigger something outside of this region?
Right.
Probably not. Okay.
Why?
Because we're too far away. The ability to trigger another earthquake is very spatially defined. So the most likely place to trigger it is at the same fault. As you go away with distance, it becomes much less likely.
How far is that from the San Andreas?
It's quite a ways.
Quite a ways. It's not even on that figure. It's over 100 miles to the San Andreas from this location.
And the Garlock?
The Garlock fault is a lot closer.
Yeah.
And the Garlock fault is another long fault. If we were going to be triggering something really big, the Garlock might be a source for it. This is sort of like when landers happened near the San Andreas. And we said, if we're going to set off something bigger, there's only the San Andreas around. Of course, it didn't happen. But it was a possibility, a low probability possibility. The Garlock, luckily, really runs through some of the most isolated parts of California.
You said yesterday there were 2 faults making this L pattern, so there was that lower little leg.
Right.
Now, the top part, that's the part that's extended.
It's the northwest part that's extended and grown, whereas the southwest striking one doesn't seem to have had more earthquakes.
Is that a surprise at all to you that this fault system was capable of this kind of earthquake?
No. There was a magnitude 7.5 in 1872 in the Owens Valley. There have been lots of 6s. There's this whole series. When I said Nevada, 1915 and 1954, and I don't have the magnitudes in my head this time, but they were 7s. There were series of earthquakes with several events within them of 6 to 7. In Mammoth in 1980, there were 4 magnitude 6.5s that happened in one sequence over about 10 days. This part of California is characterized by these type of groups of earthquakes that there might be several that end up larger. The first one is often not the biggest one. Knowing that which one is the biggest one means waiting till we see that we aren't getting another one.
When was the last time we had something sizable on Garlock?
Not in the historic record.
Yeah, prehistoric.
Prehistoric.
This is extending about 25 miles, you said earlier?
That's an approximate guess off of looking at these figures, which are having trouble coming up.
The northwestern fault, is that the one that's moving into China Lake?
The southwest striking one is the one that goes sort of from China Lake down to Ridgecrest. The northwest is going up through the China Lake Navy base.
I know that there has been trouble trying to get geologists onto base. Have you guys made any progress on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, our geologists have contacted the Navy and are able to get on the base with some limited access. Now, that was prior to tonight's event. So presumably, well, I would expect that there may be further damage on the naval base. We don't know yet. I haven't gotten reports. But my suspicion is that the geologists are going to be able to get out there very quickly and look at potential rupture. The other comment here, just following on what Dr. Jones was saying, when we have events that where a main shock then becomes a foreshock, typically the triggering is relatively close, and that's actually what we saw here. These two earthquakes are relatively closely located, so the triggering typically does not happen at a great distance. More typically, it's close by.
I can't think of any example where we've seen this type of foreshock triggering that isn't within just a matter of a few kilometers. I mean, the famous widespread one was Elmore Ranch and Superstition Hills, a 6.2 that was on a southwest striking fault and then set off a 6.6 on a northwest striking fault, sort of like this. The epicenter of Elmore Ranch was up here, but the fault extended right down to the Superstition Hills. And we were seeing aftershocks pounding at the Superstition Hills fault up until the time that the earthquake happened, the main shock happened. And we've got a similar situation here where we've had aftershocks along this fault. And then we had the 5.4 breaking through a bit towards the northwest, and now we've had it again. And we now see more aftershocks up to the very northwest end. And chances are we stop now. It's possible that we'll continue to extend up to the northwest.
Right, but you said for a 7.1 magnitude quake, you could expect an aftershock sequence that lasts for over a year.
Yes. All right, so the 7.3 Landers earthquake, the last magnitude 5 to that 1992 earthquake happened in 1998, so 6 years after the main shock. We should be expecting to record earthquakes here for a long time.
Can you describe that terrain of where this aftershock was, or where this main shock was?
Well, the terrain is very isolated. It's desert, not a lot of population. So actually, in a sense, for being able to get people out there and look at it, there's a good opportunity. And also because it's not densely populated, the chance of having damage to structures and injuries is much lower. But it is still very, it's hard rock. These are faults that are breaking through hard rock. That's why they create these waves that we feel strongly, even down here in Los Angeles. There we go. Now we got
one more, actually. Can we do?
Yeah, we're now getting some of our graphics up. So,
okay.
Lucy, if you want to describe this, and I can kind of point.
Right. So the blue means it happened more than an hour ago, but less than 24 hours ago. You can actually see some yellow underneath because we're more than 24 hours since the main shock. But all those blue dots are the aftershocks over the last 24 hours, and that's the red ones are within the last hour. So the main shock has already turned blue, and that's right there. The epicenter of the 6.4 was basically at that corner, and we think ruptured, well, clearly ruptured to the southwest, probably also some rupture to the northwest in the same event, maybe in the aftershocks afterwards. Then the 5.4 aftershock was the one this morning was located right in there, moved the fault a little farther. Then we have the 7. And now look at that cluster up to the northwest. We think, right now we aren't getting many of our aftershocks recording yet. The system's pretty strung out. And pretty sure that is a continuous aftershock zone, and that would mean that's the extent of the fault.
Yeah, so
right, and just the length of the fault, a magnitude 7.1, we would expect that it's probably at least about 25 miles long. And that would imply probably that whole length from where the 6.4 happened up to where those aftershocks are up in the corner.
That says China Lake up there.
This is
the red is.
Yeah, so the
okay.
naval.
Oh yeah, right. The Naval Air Station is that whole area. So this is all within the Naval Air Station. There's a fault system. So we see all these little faults on the ground. Rather than naming each little piece separately, it's been called the Little Lake Fault System. And so that's, these are...
So the length of the fault itself has been defined by the 7.1 earthquake?
No, we don't know.
You don't know it.
Right, and if you look at the mapping that we can see there, and one of the things we can do if we got a bit of a break and found some stuff, we could pull out... we'll try to get out the state geology map and really see the detailed mapping that's been done in here beforehand. But notice that there's this little string of, you see where the cursor's showing you all those little faults going up to the northwest. And it was not mapped as a through-going fault. It was little pieces up through here, and now we have more little pieces farther up. So no, we can't say, oh, the fault's used up. It would, but most likely, if we were to see more going on, I would think it more likely that we're heading to the northwest than turning around and coming to the south again.
So the surface rupture, how close would that be to the epicenter? I mean, are they tied together?
They are the same. Like the epicenter is only the place where the fault started to move. It is not the location of the earthquake. The earthquake happens over the whole fault surface. And just like if I were going to try to tear this, I can't do this. What I would do is I'd start a tear here and then rip down this way. And this would be the epicenter, this would be the fault surface. The earthquake's happening over this whole fault. So we think that what's happening here is a fault about 25 miles long. We started at the end, the part that hadn't broken before the 7.1. Potentially it ruptured in both directions. About 80% of earthquakes are unilateral rupture in one direction, and about 20% rupture in both directions.
So on the 178, there was a left lateral slip of about 6 inches. Could we expect that to grow?
That's actually, the left lateral one is down on the southwest striking fault. So down here, and it's not at all clear that part has moved in the 7.1.
So do you know what kind of earthquake it was yet?
What do you mean by kind of earthquake? It's a strike slip. It's strike slip. It's strike slip. Yeah, that's something that we can get from the seismic records, and it's very clearly strike slip.
Yeah, and just to follow on with that, the event yesterday was left lateral strike slip, which actually released some compression on what we think is the fault that ruptured this evening in the 7.1. This event presumably is a right lateral strike slip, but basically motion horizontally. And again, with this magnitude and this length, the expectation of having surface rupture is much greater. And by being able to go out and actually measure, in a 7.1, I'm trying to think back for landers, there was up to, 10 feet of displacement.
18 feet was the maximum displacement in the landers.
18 feet of displacement.
Meaning if the fault ran between you and me, right now we're looking at each other, after the earthquake, I would be 18 feet farther down there.
Yeah.
There was a school of thought a while ago that the seismicity of the state was moving straight up, as opposed to San Andreas. And you had landers, you had Hector Mine, now you have this. Does this add to that academic debate?
Right, that debate was not on human timescales. That was saying we were moving over there in the next few million years.
But and actually, let me turn that around a little bit. I think these events are a reminder that we can have earthquakes anywhere in Southern California. And on a human time frame, as Dr. Jones is explaining, an event like today's could occur in the LA Basin. It could occur down south in the San Diego area. That's just because we live in an area that has many, many active faults.
Right, but if you have an earthquake fault, an earthquake of 7.1 magnitude, 150 miles away from the major metropolitan area, and you suffer damage here, you're in big trouble.
Was there damage in the Los Angeles area?
No, my point is we get calls and we ask for it. And there's a report of a power outage or somewhere. The region has to sustain a 7.1 150 miles away.
Oh, absolutely. And I think for the most part, the region has. I think the incidences are probably somewhat isolated. I would be very surprised if there was much widespread impact in the Los Angeles area. But clearly up near the epicentral region, the Ridgecrest area, those folks are having to deal with a lot right now. We haven't gotten any direct reports here, but I'm sure there's lots of damage, and they are probably dealing with aftershocks as well.
You're waiting to hear from your geologists. What information will they provide?
Well, they're going to be out in the field as soon as they can and as best they can. Obviously, it's nighttime right now. They may be limited. This is the Naval Air Weapons Station. Okay, so there's unexploded ordnance issues. They may not be able to get out there at night. When they get out there, they'll have to be escorted. All those logistics are something they're going to determine.
But what they're looking for is finding a fault where we find that motion that's happened. Because we are seeing, with our seismometers, we see these waves coming off of here, and we calculate back they're probably coming off of the surface. When we get those field geology, it's like this fault has moved. And so it's ground truth.
We know that the Navy
and
is testing conditions out there. Is there any chance at all that anything underground from the Navy may have triggered any of this?
No.
Look, we've set off pretty large nuclear blasts without ever setting off an earthquake. The largest earthquake, I think, set off by the largest nuclear blast is like a magnitude 2.
And the hypocenter for this one is down at 10 miles beneath the surface.
Is there anything about this earthquake that's surprising at all to you?
The size?
Well, no, in a way.
Yeah.
I mean, as Dr. Jones was explaining yesterday after the 6.4, there was a possibility of having a larger event. And sure enough, we did. And, the mechanics of these two faults, the conjugate faulting, actually makes a lot of sense from a geologic or scientific perspective. So I would say no, there's not really any surprises that we've seen so far.
What can you learn from it?
Well, hopefully, number one, learn a little bit more about how earthquakes work. Number two, I think, there's teams out there looking at damage, how buildings responded. Every earthquake is a chance to learn what worked, what didn't work, and make improvements.
And obviously, a better understanding of earthquake triggering. Hopefully, we'll be able within this, because we have, I can go and rattle off all these previous earthquakes where we've seen one trigger the other. The recordings we have of those earthquakes are primitive compared to what we have now, and we don't really know all of what the mechanisms were in this earthquake. With the system that we put in place to do early warning, we now have hundreds and hundreds of stations that are out there giving us much clearer pictures of what's going on the fault. So now we're going to be able to see with much greater resolution than we've had in the past, what part of which fault moved and how did the pattern progress and of course there's always the hope that we'll find something that's different about the foreshocks.
Yeah, and let me just add,
we haven't.
let me just add, in terms of learning, the shake alert system, which has been put in place in the last few years and is constantly being tested. This is an excellent test case for that system. We'll be able, in the coming days, be able to analyze how the system performed. Are improvements required? I suspect yes, maybe in terms of estimating the magnitude. So that's another point where we'll be able to build on this event and make some progress.
I'm seeing a report from USGS that this fault is so shallow, it was technically above ground, listed as a 9 on a violent Mercalli intensity scale. What is that?
Not something coming from a scientist?
Yeah, I don't know if that, I doubt that's coming from the USGS. So earthquakes obviously cannot occur above ground. Yeah, yeah.
All right, there are some times where our location might show up as being a negative depth, and that means something went wrong in how we located it.
Yeah.
The depth is actually much harder to construct.
All right.
All right, we lost that signal.
We gleaned some fantastic information from
Going down,
Dr.
because we don't have
Jones.
anything
Okay, let's
below
see
it.
The
if...
depth of this earthquake is similar to what you've seen before, historically in this region.
Yes. In this region, we've had somewhat deeper faults. The area is, that idea of, redirecting the San Andreas. We are seeing this area opening up. It is what the geologists call the basin and range system. So you have the big fault that's on the side of the Sierra Nevada, and then we have the faults that are forming all of the different ranges that go out through Nevada, all the way out to the Wasatch in Utah. So everything between the Wasatch and here is called the basin and range. So it's an area with lots of faults that's spreading out, and some of them happen by faults that move up and down, and some of them happen by these horizontal ones sort of squeezing out along the way. And the rate at which they happen summed up as about 10 to 20% the rate of what we see on the San Andreas. And the geological discussion, is that because it's going to eventually take over from the San Andreas, or is that some other sort of millions of years, right? Yeah. Not on our time scale, but it's still, we sometimes call this a complex plate boundary. 2/3 of the motion happens on the San Andreas. The rest of it gets smeared out through other faults. And this is the 10 to 20% that's smeared out to the east.
You said the Wasatch, but do we see these kind of events in Utah?
Yeah. Well, the farther east you go, the less frequent they are. But we're pretty sure there are magnitude 7s under Salt Lake City about once every 1,000 years. And here along through this region, it's also, as I said, I think 1915 and 1954 and 1872 were all at close to magnitude 7, coming up through somewhere between here and up to Reno.
Okay, about 5 more questions. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about...
I've got a question about the conjugate system here. The fact that these two are conjoined, does that add any energy to it's just happenstance that these two are connected?
As far as we can tell, actually, the better picture we get of the earthquakes as we put in more instruments, the more often we see multiple faults in the events. We think they probably really were. Most of them are like this, that we're just finally being able to resolve it.
Yeah. The way we just describe that is earthquakes were a lot simpler when we had less data. Yeah. So.
And we're back in that 5% zone again since this hit, correct?
Correct. Well, yeah. Every earthquake has that 5% chance type of level of being a foreshock, and the fact that it had foreshocks doesn't, as far as we can tell, really change that probability.
You said before
we should be able to provide an update on those aftershock probabilities within the next hour or so as the data from this 7.1 is analyzed. So for now, 5% is kind of the ballpark figure.
Right. It might go up a little bit if we see a lot. No, the only thing I was trying to say was that we don't get the 7s very often.
When's the last time you were a 7?
The same time, last time we had a 6. The last earthquake we had above 6 was a 7.1 Hector mine in 1999, so 20 years ago.
With your hands, could you show what a left lateral slip strike looks like?
Okay, strike slip means that you slip along the strike. So the strike gives you the orientation of the fault. If you're slipping parallel to that, it's horizontal. The opposite is dip slip, where you're slipping in the direction of the dip of the fault. So strike slip, if we move, let me see. I do my thumbs, I go like this, I now have to, on this side, I have to step to the right to find the rest of my thumb. But if I went here, I also would have to step to the right.
So one stays still.
So that's right. So, well, no, they both, that's all relative. Yeah. They move with respect to each other. And if they move like this, it's right lateral. If they move like this, it's left lateral.
And that's San Andreas as well, strike slip.
The San Andreas is strike slip, right lateral.
Northridge wasn't. Northridge
was a dip slip, moving up the fault, growing the mountains. So, in general, the faults are, many parts of California, we see this strike slip motion, and what it's leading to is a gradually extending of it. It isn't pushing us up or pushing us down, but it is sort of moving sideways and stretching out parts of the state.
Yesterday, you guys talked about a little bit about the lack of we've basically been in a drought period for major earthquakes. Does this sort of confirm that, affirm that, or do you guys see it opening up to a new normal of some sort?
Right. This earthquake is still only one sequence. And so the fact that we've had the 7 after the 6.4 does not change. This is one sequence in that thing. We just, in geology, we can look at the geology, we can look at the long-term pattern. We know that we need to have an earthquake of at least 6 or bigger every 3 to 5 years in Southern California. It's been 20. This 20 years without any can't be the long-term normal, just because geology shows us we need more than that.
Okay, last question.
In terms of the damage that could be expected in places like Trona and Ridgeway, can you just talk more generally about how much more susceptible these buildings are coming just one day after?
That's going to be an issue, that the building that was damaged in the first earthquake is then weaker and more likely to sustain damage in this earthquake. So, but that's completely hypothetical at this point. You really need to get the engineers on the ground. There were engineers, I saw stuff today that the engineers were getting out there to inspect the buildings. Hopefully they'll be there tomorrow.
Is there any description that you were able to get from the engineers or from the field teams yesterday about what they observed? Anything else?
Just some brief reports. There was a call earlier tonight. For example, there was a hospital that had been inspected and actually was found to be structurally okay. That was after the 6.4. So the engineers are there, and they have looked at some buildings. Clearly they're going to be looking at either the same buildings or other buildings now. But it's too early for any of that information to come back.
And remember that both the geologists and the engineers are physically looking at things, and it's a lot more difficult to do at night.
Yeah. Okay. I think we're going to.
Or you can find out more about the aftershock sequence.
Yeah. So we're going to. We need some time to kind of look at the data that's come in. We'll have a briefing again shortly.
Okay.
Hopefully by 10:30 we hope, because I'd like to go home and. Well.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Dr. Jones has had a really long day. We interviewed her here at the studio earlier today, and she has been making her rounds all over Southern California, talking about yesterday's event, and then this one eclipses that. But we did glean,
new information.
Some really great information. Number one, she did reiterate that it's unlikely that what's going on up there will affect any fault lines down here.
That it will not trigger a quake in any faults outside of the Ridgecrest area.
The thing to keep in mind, and she always says this, is there's no such thing as a set rule, but there's likelihoods, and it's less likely that that's going to trigger something down here. That's right. Important. There's a 5% chance that we could still get yet another quake that's even stronger than the 7.1 from this fault system.
Right.
So that exists. 1 in 20. But a 5% chance. And also, did you find that interesting when we got the quake alert system? We actually got to watch it work with them.
That was so fantastic because they told us in 26 seconds we're going to have a 5.7 magnitude quake.
You could watch the countdown. It was a 5.7. It said it was a 5.7 aftershock.
That magnitude is in question. That was not confirmed.
But we saw the waves moving and moving, and we saw the countdown. When that countdown hit them, it also hit us, and our lights started shaking.
We could see the lights shaking here in the studio. That was amazing. And again,
accurate.
Lucy Jones immediately was saying that didn't quite feel like a 5.7. It's coming out as a 3.5. So that part of it is still in question. But the fact that we watched the countdown for 26 seconds and then at 0 we saw the lights move in here, that was really fantastic.
And that's why that is vitally important as we get better at predicting, or not predicting earthquakes. I'm sorry I even said that, but doing this early warnings, alerting people that the waves are coming. We shut down trains, etc. Anything that could be damaged extensively from those waves that are heading our way. Very important technology.
Right. And then we should point out that these are the largest quakes that Southern California has had in 20 years. So these are very significant. Authorities are now reporting some injuries and damage from this big quake, and it was felt not only here in Southern California, but also in Vegas, as we have heard throughout the night, and even in Mexico as well.
Los Angeles Fire Department, though, this is good news that they have searched the city. This is LA City Fire Department, and they said that they have not found any significant damage. So they're downgrading their alert back to normal. That's in the Los Angeles area. It doesn't necessarily mean outside of these areas that, as we've already reported, that there are some damage and injuries. And live pictures from Air 7 as it flies over Southern California. We are trying to get confirmation of a couple of places that might have some power outages. Stay tuned for that. We'll try to give you some verification of that.
Right. And I want to go back to earlier we spoke to Leticia Juarez, and she was telling us that she had interviewed someone from Trona, and this is the area that's 8 to 11 miles away from the epicenter, from Ridgecrest, and that people were fleeing on Highway 178. And you might have seen earlier reports, the picture of the Highway 178 had that big crack in the road, and Caltrans moved in very quickly, and within an hour or two had repaired it. She was saying that same highway was had suffered damage, but this time it was a center divider, and that there was a significant crack.
Right. So a lot of concern about Ridgecrest. So we have somebody on the phone from Ridgecrest right now. His name is Chris. Chris, can you
from the Owens Valley.
Okay, I'm so sorry. Our connection is just not very good, and I know you mentioned the aqueduct. What is your concern again with the aqueduct?
Well, this Indian Wells Valley that has the naval base and a city with 1,000 people, well, we're drying up because Los Angeles is taking all our recharge water.
Okay, water issues and
Yes,
structural
and a town with
integrity.
1,000 people, yes.
Right. Okay, thank you. Chris held on the phone.
30,000.
Oh,
30,000 people.
Comfort can be inspirational.
We have to say thank you.
So we
to
gave
you
the
because we
CRV
know
more
you
space.
held on
Thank
the
you for
phone
your
so
time,
long.
and you're true professional.
Right.
Really appreciate you.
Thank you.
You
We
bet.
hope you're safe out there. Thank you.
So much information to get to right
yes.
now.
Right now we want to go to Sid. He's at the Americana here in Glendale, and apparently many, many people felt it there. Sid, what are you hearing? What can you share with us?
Nerves are rattled. Let me bring in Aaron Johnson. You were at work when it happened. Where were you, and what did it feel like when it hit?
I was at a CPK in Glendale, and it's a large building, almost like a pseudo high-rise. And so the building did exactly what it was supposed to do. It started swaying, back and forth, but it was really disorienting, And I remember I kind of got down into a leg lunge, just wondering what was going on.
What did you guys do as far as the staff and then the customers that were in the restaurant at the time? Did you evacuate or just?
No, we didn't evacuate. I mean, it wasn't that extreme, but I mean, nonetheless, it was unsettling, and so we all just kind of made sure everyone was okay. We went to the guests, made sure that they were okay, and then just subsequently we just kind of went out, went through the night.
When you see how busy it is, and after what happened earlier today, is it kind of like, okay, for about 10, 15 seconds it was scary, but now it's time to move on?
Actually, that's exactly what it was. I mean, it was that exact moment where we all realized, like, okay, well, that it's over and done now. It's time to keep moving forward.
All right, Aaron, I appreciate you standing by. And that's been pretty much the sentiment from people we've spoken to here today. They felt it. It was kind of a rolling motion. But now, let's just get back to going back to dinner, or as one guy told us, I'm late for a movie. Reporting live in Glendale, I'm Sid Garcia, ABC 7 Eyewitness News. Send it back to you.
All right, Sid, thank you. Those are good words that the person you spoke to used, disoriented, unsettling. I think we can all say that was the case for us.
It's interesting because this quake was so powerful, it's really extended. If you can envision where Ridgecrest is, and that is basically, if you know where LA is and Las Vegas is, Ridgecrest would complete the triangle. And so it's in that area of the desert where it could hit Fresno, Vegas, Southern California, and obviously Bakersfield. But all of these communities are feeling it. So we're getting reports like Carrie Skillman, our entertainment producer with George Pinocchio, she said her parents felt it all the way down in way South Orange County significantly. Yeah. So folks are feeling it everywhere.
Well, we've heard reports in Las Vegas.
Okay, guys, that's going to do it for us here at News Now. Thank you so much for joining us today. As we've mentioned, we're here Monday through Friday, each and every single day, bringing you the latest and breaking news from across the country today. Obviously, you saw it comes in handy to have us right there on your YouTube channel, subscribe to, so you can always be notified when there's breaking news. And again, I'm Christy Larson. Thanks for joining me here on this Friday night.
Many people that felt this huge quake here in
see from you guys again on Monday. And thanks for being here with us today.
You were home with your mom when this hit, and what did it feel like?
It was very, I don't want to say calming, but it was much like a wave, like you're on a boat ride. It's very different from what we usually felt before, where we get these sudden jolts. So after the earthquake, it was just, I felt a little nauseous. I know a lot of other friends, they also felt nauseous as well, just because it was so long and swaying back and forth.
How long do you think it lasted? And you said you felt one and then a second one.
Yeah, the first one was, it was kind of, quick. And then all of a sudden, we started getting it constantly. I would say maybe it was about 45 to 1 minute.
And what was going through your mind when this was happening?
At first, when I felt the small one, I was thinking nothing of it. But then after the second one hit and it kept going and going, then my mother and I definitely jumped up, make sure we got into a safe area, just in case a big one did come. So we were getting prepared for that.
And you did feel the one yesterday here in Buena Park as well, maybe to compare them.
Yesterday's was definitely not as bad as today's. So today's was definitely much, much more worse.
And you said things in your house, you could see stuff moving and...
Yeah, we could definitely see things shaking. And that's why I was kind of worried, because after I started seeing more things shake compared to what it was yesterday, we wanted to definitely make sure we were safe and make sure we had cover. So, yeah.
And where did you go?
I go under the door, and then hold both sides just to grab, to be safe.
And any damage at your place?
No damage at all.
Now, you were talking, you've had some friends texting you as well. Maybe tell me, some in San Diego, you said, told you that they felt it?
Yeah, I have some friends in San Diego who said they felt the quake. A few friends in San Francisco, they said they didn't feel nothing at all. So I know San Francisco is pretty far, so they probably wouldn't have felt it. But definitely people in like San Diego felt it.
And you were saying, too, that you are prepared in case the big one were to hit, or in case there was damage where you might have to be out on your own?
Yeah, definitely. We do have a lot of water bottles, you know, instant noodles, Spam, things like that. Anything that's non-perishable that will last quite a while. And then we do try to rotate it out every few years to make sure everything is still fresh.
Right, and that's what everybody should be doing. And I think with these earthquakes, it's really bringing it home to go ahead and do that just as a precaution. You've been doing it even before yesterday's quake, though.
Yeah, definitely. We've done it for years because, again, we live in California, so we know there's earthquakes. So you never know what you can expect. So it's always better safe than sorry.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Hassan. Thank you for waiting, and thanks for speaking with us and sharing that. And we're here live in Buena Park. Eileen Frere, ABC 7 Eyewitness News. We'll send it back to you.
All right. Eileen Frere, thank you very much. Mark Brown now joining Giovanna, and what a day it has been here in Southern California.
Indeed.
The second day, the second earthquake. I apologize for my lack of tie. I was off today. I was actually at Dodger Stadium.
You were at the Dodger. You felt it there.
Hit. We can talk about that a little later. We have Jory Rand right now. He is live in Valencia. He can tell us what things are doing at the moment there. Jory.
Yeah, and we're at Valencia Town Center, and if there's another briefing and you need to interrupt us, just let us know. We're at the movie theater here where a lot of people were inside when the movie struck. There was no official evacuation, but some people, many with small kids, got up during the middle of whatever movie they were seeing and came out here. Oftentimes, many of them did not come back. So we are here with Kyle, Dylan, Lucas. Kyle's actually the son of our sports producer, Dave Brill. Kyle, what was it like inside the theater?
Well, just like a couple days ago, everything just started to sway, and we immediately realized it was an earthquake, and so did everybody else. And the whole theater just began to like get up and walk out of the theater, and there wasn't anyone like screaming or anything, but it was honestly just surreal. Like we stayed in the theater, but there was this huge fan ahead of us, above us, that was just swaying, and like it was kind of scary, but. Yeah,
it sounds like it. So there was no screaming, but I'm sure people started talking and shouting.
Like at least half the theater got up and walked out of the theater. And then eventually everyone started to come back, but there was still a bunch of more empty seats than there was before the earthquake hit.
Anything from management about whether to leave, whether people would get their refunds if they left?
Well, since we didn't leave the theater, we didn't really hear much. You know, we just kind of like finished up the movie and walked back out. But
okay, so you're probably too young to have experienced Northridge. Probably weren't alive at the point. What has this been like for these last 2 days to go through earthquakes this size?
It's just been like an interesting experience. Nobody's been hurt that I've been around, obviously, in this area. So it's more just been like a weird, experience to feel what an earthquake was like, and hopefully not another big earthquake hits like the one in Northridge, because I've heard stories about how bad that one was.
All right, well, appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your Friday night. Thanks so much. Glad everything has turned out okay. We're going to take a little walk, guys. Over here, there is a group of folks eating dinner, and one of their daughters was actually in the theater at the time. We'll put them on the spot right now. Guys, can we talk about what happened? Can we talk about what happened during the earthquake? What you guys felt? Were you here?
We were here.
We were here. These umbrellas were like swaying back and forth, and I thought he was like tapping his leg and shaking the table, and I'm like, stop it. And he's like, no, it's an earthquake. And we just wrote it out, and it was kind of fun.
Yeah,
and
you said your daughter is in the theater?
She's in the movies right now, actually.
And I think they evacuated the theater and
then they
got him out.
And put him back in. Did she texted you?
Yeah.
What was happening? What did she say?
Yeah, she asked us if we were okay, and we said we're fine, and she said, okay, we're going back in, and so that's where we're at now.
So it sounds like she might have been more concerned than
she was more concerned about us than we were with her, because, I mean, she's 200 feet away, so we were okay. We figured she was okay. So.
Yeah, okay. What has this been like to go through? Were you guys here for the Northridge quake? And
yeah, it's been kind of fun because it was more like rolly, like you're on a boat, and it's kind of just rolly rather than that intense shaking.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit fun. I never felt ever that we were in danger, right? And then we were here yesterday in the area, the same thing. It just felt kind of fun, kind of rolly, and at no point did I feel like like we were in danger, like that intense shaking.
You guys know this is a 7-1?
Yeah, we looked.
Yeah.
The worse than yesterday.
It didn't feel like it went on for a really long time. Yeah.
Okay, well, everyone's okay?
Yeah.
They're safe?
Yeah,
Good to hear.
everyone's
All right,
safe. Yeah.
thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Yeah, we first headed this way. We saw some posts on Twitter about mass evacuations outside movie theaters in the area. This one was not one of those, but again, many people left the theater at the time. We heard that big fan inside was swinging during it, but it seems like everybody here is okay, and we'll continue to talk to folks and check back in a little bit, but for now, we're live in Valencia. Jory Rand, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
All right, Jory, thank you for that. And we're going to check in with Scott Reif. He is in Air 7 HD, and he is flying over SoCal. Scott, what do you see? I know you're looking for damage.
And Mark, initially we got airborne out of Van Nuys Airport, and LA City Fire was up, LA County Fire was up. We came up into Santa Clarita. That would be a little closer, a little further north, actually to Ridgecrest. We're over Magic Mountain at the moment. We thought, we checked to see if maybe they suspended the rides. They have not. Everything seems to be normal here. And the good news is, as far as what we've seen, there was a couple reported power outages in the San Fernando Valley. We tried to spot them. We really couldn't. So if there are some power outages, they're going to be pretty small. We haven't seen a lot of response from the fire department or the police department, LA County and LA City. They did land their helicopters. Right now you see on Sky Map 7, once again, we're over Santa Clarita over the 5 freeway. And the good news is, as far as what we're seeing right here, is that we're not going to see much in the way of damage. We haven't seen anything like that. So fantastic news. We wanted to get a little further north, but the weather conditions are such. There's a little bit of a haze layer out there, sort of restricts us from getting into Ridgecrest that far up into the desert at night. But certainly good news from this vantage point as far as Los Angeles and Orange County and even Ventura County is concerned. We're not getting reports, and we would start to get those reports now if we had, fires or gas leaks or major responses, and that is not the case in this area. So certainly we're fortunate, but my goodness, the folks in Ridgecrest must really be unnerving for them. It's got to be extremely tough.
All right, Scott Reif, thank you very much for that live report. As you continue to survey Southern California, we're going to continue to keep an eye on this and update you on what has happened so far this evening. A second day, another huge earthquake in Southern California, just to reset and let you know where we are. The first one at 8:16, a 5.0. Another earthquake, the big one at 8:19. That was the 7.1 quake. And then a 4.7 at 8:22 p.m. being felt from as far away as Las Vegas, all the way to the ocean, and from as far south as San Diego up to Fresno and beyond. People all over experience it in different ways, mainly as a rolling motion, but the reports are coming in now from all of those areas, and now the damage is being surveyed throughout. There is some damage to the highway. It's 178 in that area. Is that correct, Giovanna?
Yes, in Trona. In Trona, we are under. Letitia Juarez told us earlier that Highway 178, there was some damage on the center divider there. That was the same highway that we saw damage at yesterday, and that Caltrans repaired pretty quickly. That we are understanding is now also damaged again in that area. Also, we're hearing from Leticia that people were fleeing the Trona area, that there were reports of lost power there as well. So a lot happening. We are going to continue to follow the damage there, and we have crews on the way to Trona and to Ridgecrest to get more information on that. But to clarify a little bit more on the earthquake activity, Lucy Jones referred to it as an energetic sequence earlier tonight when she was talking, and she was saying that it would not be surprising if we see aftershocks in the magnitude 6 area. And we do know now, before we get to that, one more thing to say, we have had 52 aftershocks since that 7.1 quake, and the largest was a 5.5. Let's hear now from Lucy Jones, who spoke earlier.
By definition, because the 7.1 is the largest, we give it the name main shock. So yesterday or an hour ago, we were calling the 6.4 the main shock. It has now had an aftershock that's bigger than itself, and so we changed the name. And the 6.4 is now a foreshock, and that really large aftershock has become the main shock. So the fault is growing. We ruptured a piece in the first earthquake. We ruptured a bit more on the 5.4 this morning, and we're rupturing more now. It is moving towards the northwest, away from the metropolitan area, as far as we can tell. Trying to think if we've ever seen a situation with a 6.4 or 7 and then something even bigger, and I can't think of one. Not that it isn't possible, but I can't give you an example where it's happened before. What you're really worried about is, are we going to trigger something outside of this region?
Right.
Probably not. Okay?
Why?
Because we're too far away. The ability to trigger another earthquake is very spatially defined. So the most likely place to trigger it is at the same on the same fault. As you go away with distance, it becomes much less likely.
How far is that from the San Andreas?
It's quite a ways.
Quite a ways. It's not even on that figure. It's over 100 miles to the San Andreas from this location. The main shock has already turned blue, and that's right there. The epicenter of the 6.4 was basically at that corner, and we think ruptured. Well, clearly ruptured to the southwest, probably also some rupture to the northwest in the same event, maybe in the aftershocks afterwards. Then the 5.4 aftershock was, the one this morning was located right in there, moved the fault a little farther. Then we have the 7. And now look at that cluster up to the northwest. We think, right now we aren't getting many of our aftershocks recording yet. The system's pretty strung out. And so pretty sure that is a continuous aftershock zone, and that would mean that's the extent of the fault.
All right, each one of those dots representing a whole lot of frayed nerves and some damage as well. We know that things have fallen off shelves. We had some structural damage yesterday. We have reporters on the way to Trona right now. Initial reports were that there were some fires that broke out in the Ridgecrest and Trona areas. We're going to try to get more information on those. In the meantime, we have a Felicia from Ridgecrest who joins us now. Felicia?
Hi.
Hi. Where are you, and what's your situation right now?
I'm in Ridgecrest. I was laying in bed watching TV, and the 5.0 occurred. Mm-hmm. I ran outside. My neighbors were there as well. We were standing there talking, and then all the big one hit. We ran to the middle of our street, huddled together. Our cars were shaking and bouncing so high, I didn't know if they were going to come run us over. It was very scary.
You sound like you're still pretty rattled by this, or how are you doing and are your friends doing right now?
We're okay. I'm currently at my friend's house. We pitched a tent outside, and I've also gone to a friend's house and checked on her dogs, and they're okay as well.
Felicia, do you see any damage in the area around you?
Not in my area, besides just fallen belongings. I went to another neighborhood and didn't really see anything. Okay. But I'm constantly hearing alarms, fire trucks, the helicopter with the spotlight.
And you said you pitched a tent outside. Are you and your friends the only ones who are outside now? Or are there many other people?
The street is lined with people.
Really? So nobody wants to go back into their homes at this point?
No, there's some people packing up an RV. I was considering going home to my family in San Diego, but I don't know about the roads, and it's so dark. I don't want to get stuck somewhere.
We heard reports of a power outage. Is there power there?
Our street does have power. Mm-hmm. When the earthquake happened, our outside lights turned off but then came right back on.
Okay.
But it's just chaos outside.
What about water service? Have there been any interruptions in your ability to turn on the tap and get water?
No, water's fine. Mm-hmm. The neighborhood I'm in, all of the people turned off their gas.
Mm-hmm. And then are you hearing or seeing authorities at all? Is anyone coming through and telling you, what to do, where to be, anything like that?
I heard earlier people running down the street telling people to turn off their gas. When I went to check on the dogs, I saw a lot of police presence everywhere. Other than that, I haven't heard anything else.
And then tell us where you are in Ridgecrest. Are you at all near Trona? Or is that quite a ways away?
Trona's pretty far away.
Okay.
It's about 20 minutes away from where we are.
Okay.
So are neighbors helping neighbors at this point, people banding together, or are people kind of hunkering down? What are people doing kind of socially at this point?
Neighbors are talking to each other. People have offered water. Pets are outside. I had a coworker call me to offer to come sleep in their corral in a tent on the other side of town. So people are reaching out.
Okay.
And helping.
Felicia, hang in there. We wish you well, okay?
Yes. Thank you so much.
Okay, we're going to check in now with Kern County Fire. There's a news conference underway. Let's listen.
Additional police officers at other locations. We've gone into unified command in the city of Ridgecrest, and we have a lot of people that are here to help, and we're currently taking action. And like I said, we're just gathering information right now and taking action. So with that, we'll go ahead and I'll open it up to questions.
Can I actually put this mic right there really quickly? I apologize.
Can you speak louder,
Actually,
please?
before you take questions, we want to recognize a couple of folks who are here coordinating with us. So we have, and I'm going to step out of the way, Chief.
Okay, we have Congressman McCarthy's office here, Assembly Fong, Shannon Grove's office, Mick Gleason's office, as well as other supervisors across Kern County are here to assist this operation and giving 100% support, and we're putting together a plan right now. Okay, questions?
What's the plan?
The plan is to do a systematic search of Ridgecrest for life and property and address those specific issues. Next.
Have you had any reported injuries?
There are a lot of medical aid calls out there. We know of no fatalities at this time. However, there have been a lot of ambulance calls, medical aid calls for help. Next.
I know there's crews there right now, but are you planning on sending any more resources, first responders? Do you have any numbers?
Yes, we're launching a lot of people. A lot of people are headed from a lot of different places. We have a strike team of engines that's just arriving from our county, as well as all of the local resources out in the desert are now in the Ridgecrest area. Next.
What's the biggest concern at this time?
Well, the biggest, there's many concerns. We think of the dam, we think of buildings collapsed, people trapped. However, we don't have any reports right now of major building collapses. However, there could be some. But we're going to search, and that's the first part. The first part is finding out where those buildings are and gathering that information. But there's so many calls for help that we have a backlog of calls in the Ridgecrest area. So that's where we're at.
What was your initial reaction when you felt the quake, as if you felt it based on what happened yesterday?
Well, being here in Bakersfield on the east side of town, feeling the earth move, of course, we're wondering where the epicenter was. Where did it hit? Find out the information. We found out it was a 7.1, realizing that was more significant than the one that was previous. We started launching a lot of equipment. Even though we don't know for sure what all the damage is, we want more equipment because we know how catastrophic the last one was.
We were getting reports into our newsroom that there was a fire at the hospital. Can you confirm or deny?
I don't know about a fire at the hospital. Okay, would anybody else like to make a statement? No? Okay, any other questions? Let's see, what time is it? It is 10:30.
All right, you're hearing from the sheriff there at Kern County and giving us an update as best he can. They are surveying the damage, a very systematic and detailed search. So far, they haven't found any significant or major injuries. They're getting reports of people needing medical aid. They have a backlog of calls that they are trying furiously right now to address. So they are expecting injuries. They've got no reports of any fatalities. This is different from the way things were at this time yesterday when they were talking about minor injuries, a couple of dozen calls for service. This is on an order of magnitude much larger, and the response, as you can imagine, is larger as well. There's mutual aid coming in from outside the county, different areas of the county, all over the state, coming in to Ridgecrest to help out, to make sure that there are no collapsed buildings, making sure there are no people trapped in any buildings right now. They don't have a full assessment yet. They are trying to get that, but as of now, no reports of that sort of thing having happened.
Right. The big news and the best news that he reported is that there are no fatalities that he can confirm, and he does not know anything about the earlier reports of fire at a hospital, the hospital there, so that is good. But again, you mentioned the backlog of calls. I would imagine it'd be very frustrating for them to have to get to all of these people and feel like they need to do it in a timely way and not have the resources. They have the resources, but getting out there and handling it all. He talked about the major concerns being the dam and the buildings collapse that you mentioned, and the possibility that people are trapped. But so far, there's no confirmation that any of that has happened.
All right, and a reminder while we're here, while we're talking about that, while we're listening to him responding, is that you don't want to, in the wake of an earthquake, you don't call 911 and say, hey, there was just an earthquake. They know there was just an earthquake. So you call 911 if you're hurt, if someone's life is in danger, if there's a fire or a similar sort of situation. Don't clog up the 911 phone lines. Don't clog up the phone lines period, if you can avoid it. And certainly don't do it unless there's an absolute emergency that is taking place that you can see and report. Now, I guess we can talk about where.
Well, yeah, before you get to that, and I want to hear all about that, is the fact that I just want to reiterate what Lucy Jones said earlier, that the 6.4 quake yesterday is now being considered a foreshock. So that's important to know, because we've now had 52 aftershocks since that 7.1 quake that we had at 8/19. And the possibility of having another significant quake, a magnitude 6 is very real.
Yeah. Now
this could be a long night.
You were in your office when this happened. You were.
I was in my office at 8:16 when that first 5.0 quake hit, and I think I was the only one in the building who felt it. I came out to the newsroom and I said, "Did you guys feel that? Am I crazy?" Which is what I think a lot of people think when you experience an earthquake. You're not quite sure. Is the building moving? Did I really feel that wall?
Right.
You know, shake, or is my vertigo kicking in, which I happen to have right now? So that happened, and then as we're talking, was there a quake? We started to see social media, light up with people reporting that 5.0. And then we felt collectively, all of us in the newsroom, the 8/19, and we could really feel, we could see whatever was hanging from the ceiling shake, and we could feel the building shake. And it did feel like it went on for several seconds, 20 seconds, 25 seconds, and you go through you're thinking, when will this stop? Is it going to stop? How long will it, you know what I mean?
Yeah. You start wondering.
You start wondering, is this going to be that minute-long or 2-minute-long quake?
2-minute-long quake that could erase the building that you're in.
That's right.
I was at the Dodger game. Today's my day off. I was at the Dodger game, and here it was. You had Kike Hernandez up to bat, and, the pitching continued. And all of a sudden, there's kind of this roar in the crowd. Kind of a hush goes over the crowd, and then people going. You hear conversations. You hear kind of a roar going. But look, 2 pitches continued to Kike Hernandez. The game continued, even though, and then it stopped for a second or two after it became very clear to the umpire that there was an earthquake. But everybody was like, looking around, is that an earthquake? Is that an earthquake? Then you see the foul poles doing this.
Right.
And then you know it's an earthquake. And it was like you. I was in section, where was I? We were in the left field section. Section 6, row U. So we were underneath that overhang. We were underneath the mezzanine. So I'm looking up at that, going, I hope this stops soon.
Right.
Because and my wife and I are looking at each other, and we got the kids with us. And what's the plan going to be? What are we going to do?
Right. Which direction?
We decided, if this keeps going, if it gets worse, we're running down out to the field.
Right.
Because we don't want this overhang over us while this continues.
And you said that they continued to pitch. It's quite possible the pitcher didn't feel it.
Right.
Because it really depends on where you are.
It really
I didn't feel the 6.4 yesterday. I was driving, didn't feel it at all. I had no idea until I got to my destination and everyone there was talking about it.
Yeah.
So it's,
Quite a thing. So that's the reason. About 2 hours ago, I was wearing something much different than this.
Thank you for coming in.
Luckily, I had this in my office to change into, but yeah, I was wearing my Dodger jersey, cheering them on, and all of a sudden this happens. So let's, yeah, quite an experience there for some 57,000 people or so who all went through that earthquake together.
Right. And I think we're going to check in with Scott Reif. He's in Air 7. Scott.
Yeah, you know, all those scary stories. I mean, we're just so fortunate. We got airborne, I would say, 30, 40 minutes after the earthquake occurred, maybe a little bit longer than that, just before 9 o'clock. And, you know, immediately we tried to get with the LAPD, we get with the county fire, city fire, the helicopters that were up. And for the most part, they were already landing. Now, we're over the west end of the valley right here. And, you know, during the 94 earthquake, I lived in this area, and we got hit hard. And I really feel for those folks in Ridgecrest because, you know, basically what I remember living in Chatsworth after the Northridge earthquake was 4 or 5 days without electricity and all the aftershocks, and just how nervous you get each time one hits because you just don't know if it's going to get bigger and the building's going to collapse on you at night when you're sleeping in the dark because you have no electricity. So phone service was out. So I really feel for those folks out there. Unfortunately, we just can't get up there in the dark to get a good look of what type of damage they're looking at. But fortunately, what we can tell you, as we've seen, we've flown around Los Angeles, down towards a portion of Orange County, up into Santa Clarita, and now we're in the valley. We've seen no damage. So certainly fantastic news as far as this area is concerned. City Fire, their helicopters, and LA County Fire, they all landed. They did get out. They checked a lot of freeway overcrossings just as precautions, and so far no reports of any damage or injuries. So certainly I know I was at home, and the dogs were aware of it. They certainly were a little frightened. Of course, my wife and my daughter were after it happened, and we live in the West Valley, and we felt it pretty good. So I can only imagine, though, Mark, at the game, when you're underneath maybe, you know, one of those aisles and all of a sudden it starts shaking. I mean, that's got to be frightening, just starting to decide, when am I going to run? Yeah, you kind of have to make a decision. And we had, so not to get too detailed, but our daughter has 2 of her friends with us. So we we had 3 7-year-old girls and our son who's 3. And we're all, you know, we're trying to figure out, all right, who's going to grab who? How are we going to get them down to the field quickly with all these other people if it looks like this thing's going to, you know, if it starts getting worse?
And you feel a bigger sense of responsibility when you have someone else's children with you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And a frightening aspect of that is, you know, if it just would have went on a little bit longer, it wouldn't have been a big enough earthquake to cause damage and harm you. But once panic sets in, if everybody would have started to run, you would have had people injured just trying to get out. So fortunately, we didn't have that because you start to look at those things, and exponentially it would just take off. And once panic sets in, people are going to get hurt.
Yeah, and thank goodness that didn't happen. The quake was also felt in Playa Vista. A friend texted me that they were watching Spider-Man, and it was about 15 seconds. They sat through the first 15 seconds, and then at that point, the entire theater got up very orderly and walked out of the theater. Yes. And got tickets to return to see the movie another time, so that's good. But I want to share this also. They have felt this quake in Scottsdale, Arizona. The shaking wasn't significant, reportedly, but it's noteworthy that this 7.1 quake was felt 450 miles away in Arizona, and it was felt in Mammoth as well. Again, this quake has touched many, many, many people.
Right, and we're getting information now from DWP. The power is out in Encino. It has been out in part of Encino Valley Glen area, affecting about 1,000 customers. Crews assessing those area. They believe it's related to the quake, not confirmed as yet. They're assessing. They're going to know more in the morning, but they're cautioned that it's a caution that is universal whenever there's an earthquake. Whenever there's a downed power line for whatever reason, stay away from it. Don't go near it. Assume that any downed line is a power line and that it is charged. Stay away from it. Keep everybody away from it and report it.
Right, and some positive news. LA City Fire was on emergency mode earlier. They looked through the city and they say that they're back to normal operations. No major infrastructure damage in the city of Los Angeles, so that is at least some positive news. And then I believe we have some video of a house fire. This is in Ridgecrest. Reportedly, this fire started when there was a gas line rupture. That has not been confirmed, but that's what they believe happened here. Look at these picture here. That's very unsettling. Yeah.
Right. So, and this is kind of a mirror image of what happened yesterday in Ridgecrest, where a fire broke out in someone's garage. They were able to save that house, although there were two vintage vehicles, two classic cars that were in there. But let's hear from someone here regarding this fire.
What did you feel? Describe for me what you felt.
The earthquake was bouncing. It knocked my toolbox over. I came outside, walked around a corner, and that thing was 100 foot high. Flames. Just like that. Bam. Ain't no mercy on that one. My friend just called me. You can see it from 3 miles away. You can see it.
Describe for me that moment when you first felt it.
Oh, the earthquake? Boy, that's scary because it knocked my TV over this time and my toolbox. I just put everything away. It was big. It's never a big one.
Much bigger than the one a couple days ago.
But not as long. I think it's shorter.
It's interesting he said shorter. I've heard from several people that today's felt longer. But
it depends really on where you are, how the earthquake is propagating through the earth that you're standing on. It really does strike in different ways in different places. If there's a lot of sediment, for example, in the earth that you're standing on, say it's a dry lake bed or an area that used to have a lot of sand, it's got a lot of sand underneath it, and not solid like clay, it feels different than if you're standing on rock or on a mountain or on a hillside. It just kind of depends on where you are.
Absolutely. Okay, Jory Rand is standing by. I believe he is still in Valencia. Is that correct, Jory? What can you tell us?
Yeah, Valencia Town Center. Earlier, we talked to some folks who really didn't think it was a big deal. We spoke to several people who were inside the movie theater here at Valencia Town Center at the time. Some people evacuated, some people did not. We are here with Sonia, who is among those who did evacuate the theater. Tell us what happened.
So they were sitting, getting ready to see the movie.
The probability of a magnitude 6 in the next week is over 50%, something probably around 60%. And a very preliminary estimate, a probability of a 7 might be as high as 11%. So all of that saying we're having a very robust sequence, not a surprise. It's going to continue. There's no reason to think that it's going to be stopping. So far in the last couple of hours, we recorded 2 magnitude 5s, 16 magnitude 4s, and over 50 magnitude 3s just in the last 2 hours. It does seem to be dying down a bit. You know, that first hour we were seeing a lot of stuff. The ground is moving enough that we're not seeing the smaller earthquakes at this point. We really aren't seeing anything below magnitude 3 just because the ground's moving enough from the 4s and 5s that you can't see below that.
The telemetry's eating that up.
Right, exactly. It's eating that up. And
it's 100% that you're going to have this sequence ongoing for the next.
Well, we have never seen a sequence like this suddenly stop, right? So the aftershocks will continue. It's following a pretty traditional pattern, but on the high side. So if you know, how many aftershocks will you get to a 7? Some of them have just a small number. Some of them have a lot. We're on the upper 50 percentile. And this is definitely a robust sequence, but it's far from unprecedented. It's just on the high side of average.
And Lucy, can you discuss the aftershocks again, the size of them and how many you've had?
Okay, so far we've recorded 2 that are above magnitude 5, 16 above magnitude 4, and over 50 that are above magnitude 3.
And the chances of another 7+ in your mind?
There's an estimate, a very preliminary estimate right now of about 10%, about a 1 in 10 chance that we could have another 7 within this. That's calculated for the next week.
And what about the 6 and the 5, please? What about the 6 and 5?
Okay, so the chance of something bigger than 6 is actually a bit over 50%, about 1 in 2, a little better than 1 in 50-50 chance, and the chance for 5s is approaching certainty. It would be extremely unusual if we didn't have another 5.
And that's typically within like 3 days, right? 3 days.
These estimates are all for a week.
A week.
All right. So the most likely time is right now.
Okay.
The other thing to remember, the way they die off with time, and we were seeing it after the 6, and it seems to be, we seem to be getting into the die-off period here on the 7. Whatever number you have in the first 24 hours, The next 24 hours will have about half that many. And the next 24 hours will have about a third that many, etc. So the 10th day will have 1/10 as many as we have on the first day. And what that means is it will go down pretty quickly, and then we'll have a really long tail where it will continue to have the risk for quite a while. The last time we've had earthquakes of this size, we were seeing significant aftershocks for more than a year, for several years.
And these are still to the northwest as well.
So far, everything we're seeing, we do seem to be having some, continued activity on the southwest striking part of that, the L-shaped, but the majority are up to the north.
Can you describe, Dr. Graves, the color coordination there? Obviously, the large blue one is the main shock.
Right. Yeah. So the colors that are on the reds are the most recent events, and so you can see that.
When you say recent,
well,
1 hour.
Yeah, within the last hour. So those we would say are all associated with the magnitude 7.1. Those are aftershocks, and they're spread out a bit, but you do see this cluster up to the very northwest. We would speculate that's where the rupture may have stopped, but we can't confirm that until we actually have some more data and have people get the reports back from people in the field.
You said you have geologists on the ground there. Are they reporting back to you at this point?
No, we have not been able to get communication. It's going to be difficult actually to get out there because it is on the naval weapons station.
And it's dark.
And
there's unexploded ordnance.
Yeah. So, there's some logistical challenges there. Obviously, too, these people were right at ground zero for a major earthquake.
Have we spoken with them at all since then?
Yeah, so I have had communications. Our geologists and engineers are okay, but it's nighttime. There may be issues driving around on roads. There may be structures that are damaged. We have some unconfirmed reports of gas fires in the city of Ridgecrest and so forth. So there's a lot of other stuff to deal with that's much more important than trying to get out on and look at the fault.
But restating what you said earlier, that it's trending away from Southern California.
Yes, and I think it's worth reminding, because we're talking about the probabilities, we're talking about triggered earthquakes. It's important to remind people, mostly you triggered the earthquakes right where you had the first one. The ability to trigger dies off very rapidly with distance. There's some possibility, out for a few times the fault length. So we don't usually, we haven't seen triggered earthquakes more than about 3 to 4 times the length of the fault that moved in the main shock. And this looks to be about 25 miles long. So we're getting out, maybe out over 70, 80 miles. We possible to see stuff. That's the extreme of it.
And do we know what triggered this one, the 7.1?
Well, it was triggered by the 6.4. So this is an earthquake sequence. These earthquakes are related. If you go and do a calculation, what's the chance that they're independent? It's essentially 0.
And Dr. Jones,
you were calculating before, just guesstimating on the power logarithmically of a 7.1 being larger than a 6.4. Could you go over that again? How much?
I didn't go and redo the calculations. Did you?
Let me do this quickly in my head. I think it's about a factor of 8 more powerful in terms of the amount of energy that is released during the earthquake. Now it's being released over a larger area
and a longer time.
And I think that's folks here in the LA region can attest to that. The ground shaking was pretty long. We would estimate that the actual rupture for this magnitude 7.1 probably took between 15 and 20 seconds, for it to rupture to start at the epicenter and then propagates out across the fault. Until we get a chance to look at the data in more detail, we can't be more certain about that.
And yesterday you said the 6.4 was about 5 seconds.
5 to 10, we got some data that showed it was a little on the slow side.
Yeah, a little longer.
And this one?
Probably about the same. Again, these are, the data needs to be downloaded and massaged, and it's Friday night, and so.
Doctor, one question I always find fascinating is, because I've heard you talk about it before, as best you can tell, the information isn't in the Earth's surface in advance of an earthquake that we can go, okay, something's going to happen there. But this all retrospect, of course, does this help that research?
Well, we will go in and look, but I spent a couple of decades trying to find something that was different about foreshocks than other earthquakes and never found it. We will go in and look, and one thing to be said, we have more data. We have much better stations now for this sequence than we've had for any previous foreshocks that we looked at. So if there's something there, we'll try and find it, but it's not obvious.
And you talked at the top about the probability of a 7 or greater magnitude. Does that include the possibility that this could just be another foreshock? Is that possible?
Yes, included in that approximately 1 in 10 chance of a 7 or bigger. That's a 7.0, 7.1, 7.2, 3.8 coming in. Okay.
What's your plan over the next couple of, next week or so? Are you guys like stationed here or studying this thing? Or?
He actually still has a paid job here. Right?
We are going to be working.
Okay,
Information
well,
that's coming
there they are.
We
lost the signal there for a second, but they said an aftershock is coming in. Probably about 20 seconds or so, that aftershock is going to hit Pasadena. About a 3.8, they said. 3.8 coming in, so.
Yes, that was the shake alert system that they're watching unfold before their eyes. And earlier we saw it when David was with me. They said that there would be a 5.7 in 26 seconds, and we watched the clock go down. And at 0, we saw the lights hanging move. It might not have been a 5.7 magnitude, but it was definitely the shake that shake alert system had notified everyone about.
Right, and people talked yesterday about the shake alert system, why it didn't alert people, and it wasn't a failure of the system. The system was calibrated for something that would be catastrophic or damaging or dangerous, reaching specifically the LA area. And it didn't meet the parameters for that. And this everything kind of got borne out in that way that it didn't do that.
And this is a developing system. They keep saying that they're going to learn a lot from this sequence of quakes. And so they have a lot more sensors on the ground now, hundreds of sensor stations, and they're going to have a clearer picture of how this all works. And so this robust sequence that Lucy Jones keeps calling it is going to be very educational for them and will help them develop the shake alert system even more.
All right, we're going to go over some information about this quake as we just saw kind of a blacked out area of the West Valley. Things to do after an earthquake. We're just kind of team up and talk to you about this. Check yourself for injuries. That's, of course, the first thing you got to do. Make sure you're okay.
You're going to look for and extinguish small fires if you see them, of course. And leave your gas on at the main valve unless you smell gas or think that it's leaking. We heard from someone in Ridgecrest earlier, Felicia, I believe, who said that they were hearing people yell throughout their neighborhood to turn off the gas, and they did that, although we're telling you to leave the gas on the main valve unless you smell gas.
All right, we're gonna get back to that in a second. Let's go back to that power outage. This is Encino. Through our sky map technology, you can see exactly what streets are affected, what neighborhood is affected. This is, well, obviously you see it. There it is, bordered by Moore Park Street, pretty much on one side, Densmore, Gloria, Lameda Street. A power outage there. You see emergency vehicles there. DWP is, we assume, knowledgeable about this and knows to respond there. And so that is one area that we know is blacked out. We don't know if it's earthquake related, do we?
Did we hear that it was about 1,000 people? Is that correct?
We had initial reports of 1,000 people in different parts kind of scattered through the West Valley, mainly in the Valley Glen area. This is kind of more, I think, Encino, but Valley Glen kind of also is incorporated there. So that's the area that's blacked out at this point.
Okay, not good for those folks. Okay, let's check in with Jory Rand back in Valencia. Jory?
Yeah, when that press conference started, we were talking to Sonia, who was in the movie theaters tonight with 3 of her family members. She was a trooper and waited with us for a while for that press conference to play out, but security moved us, and then she had to go. We can tell you that everyone we talked to tonight was going to see Spider-Man. Some of them left the theater at the time. Some of them did not. We spoke with one young man who said a young girl behind him in the theater wound up having a panic attack in the middle of the movie. While the earthquake was still shaking, he wound up climbing over seats to help her. I believe we have some of that sound on tape if we can go to that now.
everything just started shaking, and people were like looking around, and everyone just stood up. And some people with younger kids left the whole theater, like the movie theater, and like walked out. Some people flipped out and kind of had a little panic attack.
Well, we were sitting there watching the movies, and then all of a sudden I felt a little shaking, and it kept getting stronger and stronger. And I said, it's an earthquake happening. And after about 10, 20 seconds, people started getting up and leaving the theater. Maybe a third or a quarter of the theater got up and left.
Okay, so that first girl that we spoke with, that we just heard from, her brother was sitting right next to her, and he's the one that heard heavy breathing. He said he has a friend who suffers from panic attacks and knew the sound of it. He turned around and asked her if she was okay.
San Andreas at some point too.
And that'll be a much different story.
San Andreas, remember that we said between the 6.4 and the 7.1 is about a factor of 8. 7.1 to 7.8 is the same difference, and it'll be that much bigger. So a 7.8 on the San Andreas is going to be at least 8 times bigger than this earthquake, and of course, a lot of it be a lot closer to us. But consider this is only 10% the size of the San Andreas earthquake's a pretty big earthquake. And I don't think we should underestimate, just because we didn't get hit that badly, just how difficult it really is right now in the Owens Valley.
Going from memory, the earthquake we had, it was Easter Sunday.
Okay, Easter Sunday 2010, there was April 4th, the Elmira-Kukapa earthquake, a magnitude 7.2. I haven't been including that because it wasn't in California. The rupture was completely within Mexico. So yes, we felt it, and probably a similar sort of distance. Well, it didn't feel quite as strong here. We were a little farther away. But it was not one of our fault systems. So when we're talking about earthquake rates, what's happening on the faults, I didn't include that.
Can you remind us, like you talked about yesterday, that there's no way to predict when the next big one is coming, right? That this is all random.
Right. All of this is random, and it's something people don't like. On top of that random distribution, we
her signal there. We'll try to get it back. It looks like somebody probably kicked the plug. There she is.
Dr. We've had a couple thousand earthquakes probably at this point. The count was about 1,500 before the 7.1 happened. Now, we've only really recorded probably 100 earthquakes since the 7.1, but that's because the ground's moving so much that we can't see the smaller ones.
On a grassroots level, we all understand what you're saying. Well, not all of it, probably. But there are some people out there who are thinking, well, maybe this takes the heat off LA County. Maybe this will relieve the pressure on what's going on more locally. Could you address that?
Okay, whenever one earthquake happens, we get a lot of questions. Does this relieve the pressure over here? Does it make this earthquake worse? What does this tell about the future? What does it mean? And the problem is, what it means is we have earthquakes. And that's really all it means. It is a random distribution. It doesn't make a big earthquake more or less likely. And what we have here in Southern California, maybe we're seeing a situation where we've had this big drought. Maybe that was random fluctuation, in which case we say, well, the long-term rate is definitely higher than what we've been having for the last 20 years, and we're going to have we really need to be having more earthquakes. Or potentially there was some significance to it, in which case, one earthquake, it's hard to say that you've changed the rate. But probably, if we've gone back to a higher rate, then we're back at a higher rate. And we just really need to remember the last 20 years was not representative of what we have. We need to average out just from what geology tells us.
Yeah, and also, just as Dr. Jones said.
Okay.
All right.
We'll get the signal back, I think, but in the meantime, we can kind of, amplify what she was talking about, the random distribution. We all want to be able to figure out that there's a pattern that we can hold on to.
You can't predict it.
And you can't.
You can't predict it, no. I think we have them back.
The energy release, say, in Loma Prieta, over time, that the shadow returns.
Well, yeah, and there's actually, when an earthquake occurs, there's a redistribution of stress. So it can relieve stress in some areas, but it can also load up or promote the possibility of another earthquake happening. And that's exactly what we saw here. The 6.4 actually promoted the chance for the 7.1 to occur. So that's when, the triggering can happen like that. Even though an earthquake, the 6.4 did release some stress, it actually promoted the subsequent one to occur.
And there's really sort of two different phenomena going on. There's what's our long-term rate of earthquakes? When are things happening? That fundamentally random distribution of which fault goes next. And then there's how one earthquake modulates that. And mostly it's happening really nearby. We have had a couple of situations, probably 3 here in California, where we've had an extremely large earthquake, and the rate of other earthquakes goes down for a while. We had it after the Kern County earthquake, we saw it after Landers and Northridge, and we saw it after the 1906 earthquake. This is, we don't have enough data, right? Only a seismologist says it, I realize that. But with the limited, with what data we have, we can hypothesize whether that's a significant pattern or whether that's happenstance. And we're still trying to understand that. But so you have your long-term rate, and then you have the earthquake triggering. How does one earthquake affect the other? What are the stress changes that happen right now? And that's, we could see yesterday that we made slip on that northwest fault easier to happen. That doesn't mean it's got to keep on moving there. And that's why we ended up giving probabilities, because sometimes it happens, most of the time it doesn't. This is one of those times that it's really...
And you might get more data as a result of this.
We hope to have data that allows us to say quite a bit about more.
And you said the proximity to this one to San Andreas, it didn't increase the stress on San Andreas at all.
It's still pretty far, yeah, it's really too far away, so that this one's going to have a bit more impact because it's a bigger earthquake, but it's still far enough away that it really is, with our rule of thumb, that it's, 3 or 4 fault lengths is about as far as we ever see it. We're probably a little over 4 fault lengths away from the San Andreas. So it's closer than when we had the 6.4, but it's still not at a level that gets us to get up and jump. I'm looking at the time and the fact that it's 10 of 11, and you guys probably all have newscasts at 11 o'clock.
You're it.
My suggestion was we go and do one more check for data and plan on doing a restatement at 11 where we can give you the details at that point so you can use this for your broadcasts. Okay. But let us go see what we got. Yeah.
Right.
Can I just say I love Lucy Jones. She is such an amazing resource.
Loved her since '94.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, the takeaways that are staying with me is that we have a 50% chance of a magnitude 6-point quake happening over the next week, and an 11% chance of a magnitude 7 quake happening in this next week. And we've had, 50 magnitude 3 quakes. We've had 16 magnitude 4 and 2 magnitude 5 quakes since that 7.1.
And she says this is fairly typical. It's on the high side of normal, but this is a robust fault system. She talked about this yesterday as this being a robust fault system capable of producing sizable earthquakes. She was proven right, of course, again. And Miriam Hernandez has been at Caltech now for 2 days in a row, speaking with Dr. Lucy Jones and Dr. Robert Graves there, talking to us about trying to give science to these lay people who are asking all these questions, trying to make sense of what is happening here. Miriam, what can you tell us? We're going to try to get to Miriam.
What we've been hearing about is just a lot of quake activity leading up to this 7.1 this evening. It all started with a foreshock yesterday at 10 o'clock in the morning at about a 4.0 magnitude. It then went to a 2.5 a few minutes later, and then to that larger quake, a 6.4. There have been very strong aftershocks ever since. There was one early this morning, and then it was all capped off by the 7.1 this evening at about 8:22. I can tell you that after that one hit, that major shock hit, they have redefined what was the foreshock and what was the major shock. So the 7.1 now, the major shock, and what happened yesterday is just considered a foreshock. They say that the fault where this happened has elongated, or they noticed now that the movement has elongated, and it's gone closer to Independence. It's gone closer northwest of the initial shock, so further away from Ridgecrest, closer to the Naval Air Weapons Station. So not nearly as populated, thank goodness. The field teams have not gone to examine for any rupture in the earth yet. They'll wait until daylight to do that, but they don't expect tremendous damage actually along that fault. Of course, as Mark was pointing out earlier, we feel the shaking according to the composition of the soil that's beneath us. In Mexico City in 1985, that capital city shook like it was on a bowl of Jell-O because it was an old lake bed. Well, this area is near China Lake, so obviously a lot of shaking would be felt here. I'm going to be looking some of my notes. So again, talking about the probability of another quake, there could be another large one. It's a very small chance, a 5% chance, but the chance that this one would hit, this 7.1, that was also a very small chance. So there is that possibility, there is that potential that there could be another large quake. Dr. Lucy Jones made it clear, though, that this series of quakes does not impact any system in LA County. It does not increase the possibility or lessen the possibility. The same possibility exists as it was yesterday. So we are still seeing the possibility of a quake here in Los Angeles County. And of course, the San Andreas Fault continues to build pressure. That is the one that practically splits the state. So it is important to just be aware of that potential. So they're looking at all the quakes here on this map. Over here, if you see all those dots there, that blue, do you see that one, Chris, on the right-hand side? This is the U.S. Geological Survey map. That big blue dot, that is the 7.1. The red dots are the aftershocks that have happened like within the last hour, and you can see how they're spread out, and especially those ones going northwest. A lot of those blue dots, a lot of those red dots. Dr. Jones says that these will continue to happen in the next 24 hours, but after the next 2 hours, they should be diminishing. So they won't be as frequent from this 7.1 major shock, but they still will be continuing. In fact, she says that we can expect aftershocks from this quake, from the 7.1, to last for about a year. She says that is the pattern that was established last time there was a major earthquake in 1999, and that the people there in Ridgecrest are just going to have to get used to the fact that this rumbling, these shakes, are going to be happening very frequently. We are going to get another update at about 11 o'clock. We're going to wait for that and let you know what happens here, what additional information they're able to glean from the data they are examining. For now, reporting live from Caltech, Miriam Hernandez, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
All right, Miriam Hernandez at Caltech for a second day in a row, for a second huge earthquake in Southern California. That has been kind of the focal point for people gaining information about what is a random series of events, but a very frightening series of events. Dr. Lucy Jones, again, the center of attention today, describing what happened and the scientific elements that were involved in describing and dealing with what happened. Eyewitness News at 11, about to begin right now. Let's hear from Dr. Lucy Jones.
By definition, because the 7.1 is the largest, we give it the name main shock. So yesterday or an hour ago, we were calling the 6.4 the main shock. It has now had an aftershock that's bigger than itself, and so we changed the name. And the 6.4 is now a foreshock, and that really large aftershock has become the main shock.
All right. And a magnitude 7.1 rather, quake shaking up the Southland. It was felt from the west coast to Arizona. The epicenter was near Ridgecrest, where this house caught fire moments after the quake hit. And that earthquake made a lot of waves and pools across Southern California. We have crews spread out covering any potential damage. Chef Jose Andres had a relief team in Ridgecrest already when this evening's quake hit. This fire in Ridgecrest, he says this is a gas explosion, which is very common after big quakes. All right, very common and still unsettling to see. Fires, a frequent result of earthquakes dating back to 1906, and then, of course, through 1994, the Northridge quake, the October 17th, 1989 quake in Loma Prieta in the Bay Area, which also interrupted a baseball game, by the way. The
the World Series back then between the A's and the Giants. Who could forget that? The play definitely stopped and stayed stopped that time. But what we're seeing here is a fire that resulted, we believe, from the quake. People going up and down the streets in Ridgecrest saying, shut off your gas lines. Not necessarily the right thing to do, though. Only if you smell gas, only if there is fire should you do that, because it takes a long time to get your gas restarted. It takes a technician to do that, and you could be without gas unnecessarily for a long period of time. So only if you need to do that, do you do that.
Right. Thousands of people, thousands upon thousands of people have felt this quake. We've heard from people in Playa Vista, in Westwood, in Culver City. We've heard in Glendale, obviously, here we felt it. And then as far away as Mexico. And we heard from LA City fire officials earlier, no major infrastructure damage, I should say, has been found in the city of Los Angeles, but authorities have been reporting injuries and damage from this quake reported, but we still don't have, we haven't seen evidence of that yet, you know, with the exception of that fire.
Right, and so we're waiting for officials in Ridgecrest to give us more information about any potential casualties. There were casualties yesterday. They weren't major casualties, but people did suffer injuries, more the type of cuts and bruises, people walking in bare feet through broken glass in the wake of an earthquake, which can tend to happen. But what you're looking at here is video from today's quake. Look at what happened in this store in the Ridgecrest area. Clearly some structural damage there. You look at the ceiling tiles that fell out, and Dr. Lucy Jones now has been able to make some calculations. She's going to hit the podium there shortly. She, along with her colleague from the U.S. Geological Survey, will be speaking to the reporters in just a couple of minutes. They've been pretty much steadily out there, and they're trying to get as much information as they can by going back over the calculations, crunching the numbers, if you will, to make more determinations about what we're dealing with here and the likelihood of additional quakes and what the size and frequency of those additional quakes might be.
And we're going to check in with her right now, or we've been receiving so many videos of different, you know, what the quake looked like in different places. One that I saw was the evacuation of passengers in Ontario onto the jetway. They were at the airport, and that was unsettling for those people there. We've seen chandeliers shaking, you know, other light fixtures shaking, people reporting water splashing out of their pools and their ponds. And again, there was that question about, was the 7.1 longer than the 6.4? We heard some conflicting reports, but Lucy Jones saying tonight that it was longer. It was about 10 seconds longer than the 6.4.
And they were doing the math kind of on the podium there. They figured out it was about 8 times stronger than the quake yesterday, and that really says something. This is not an arithmetic progression. It's geometrical, I believe. So let's listen to Dr. Lucy Jones.
For your patience, we want to give a bit of a summary on tonight's earthquake. Of course, we had a magnitude 7.1. It is part of the ongoing sequence that we're calling Searles Valley. So it's strongly affected both Ridgecrest and China Lake. The earthquake yesterday, the magnitude 6.4, we are now calling a foreshock because the 7.1 tonight is larger. That really is just a semantic distinction. We have a sequence of earthquakes, and we have a 4.8 aftershock that is just beginning and will be coming down here soon, but we shouldn't have any shaking. We should turn the sound off, yeah. One thing we wanted to show you, the estimate is now up to 5. Maybe we will fill it. Let's see. If this is a 5, it will be our third aftershock of magnitude 5 or greater. And we've also had, I just got the total, 17 magnitude 4s and over 70 magnitude 3s since the main shock happened. And we have the aftershock going. You know, this comes out as actually 5. It will be the third one above magnitude 5. And I just felt that. Okay.
Yeah, very
slightly. We barely felt it. The one thing that we added to this was we brought up a picture. We find our first photo in from the field from USGS geologist Ben Brooks. Maybe, Rob, you want to take this?
So as I had mentioned earlier, we do have geologists in the field. So they are able to get out. This is along Highway 178. that it actually had been damaged in a different area during the magnitude 6.4. What we're looking at here is damage associated presumably with the fault offset. You can see where the road on the down the road, it has actually moved to the right. So this is the right lateral horizontal displacement that we were talking about earlier that's associated with the larger event, with a magnitude 7.1. There's about...
And the road appears to be...
Yeah, it's down towards the kind of the southeast end of this magnitude 7.1 sequence. So
closer to Trona than to...
Yes, yes, closer to Trona.
Right here.
And we suspect that the fault is actually ruptured much further to the northwest. That is the area that's on the China Lake Naval Weapons Station. So presumably they're not able to get out there tonight. But we are obviously seeing displacements that are associated with this earthquake. And what is seen here, this is about 30 centimeters.
So it's about 1 foot.
About a foot in total. And one thing you can notice in this is it's actually not just a single break. All right, there's a distribution across numerous fault strands. And that's what we had also seen before. This is a...
Only 3.6. We need to figure out how to turn the sound off.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. So does that mean that we're looking at a surface rupture of about 25 miles in length?
Well, this is just one point.
Yeah.
And it's down towards the south. I would speculate that we will find surface rupture along to the northwest as well.
Am I incorrect in thinking that there would be more of a surface rupture closer to where the point of origin is?
No, it can be highly variable. And in fact, in a number of cases, where the epicenter is located actually has a smaller amount of slip.
If there's a huge variability. At the ends of the fault, you often see less than you see in the middle of the fault because, it's tapering off before it ends. And this does appear to be at the very southern end of the rupture zone.
Yeah. So hopefully they'll be able to get out maybe tomorrow or the next day and look along other sections of the rupture. But this is a pretty dramatic picture. Fortunately, they were able to actually get out there tonight. Presumably, I think these guys and gals are going to be working throughout the night to gather as much data as they can.
But we should see more of this tomorrow.
I suspect so, yes.
Yeah.
How many people are out there?
I don't have an exact count, but I would say probably 10 to 15, maybe more.
There's a few of them that have come from the USGS, but there's also geologists from the Southern California Earthquake Center, which is a consortium of all the universities. So I think we're seeing scientists from a lot of the UCs and a lot of other institutions are going to be out there because you don't get many chances when you're a field geologist to collect this sort of data.
And on that note, I was in Ridgecrest until just a couple hours ago, and I ran into geologists pretty much everywhere I went, and a lot of them were there just casually because of the fact that they got to see what was happening up there. At what point do all of those people become activated and become a network of information?
Yeah, so it's actually very difficult logistically to coordinate all this. The USGS has teamed up with the California Geological Survey to take the lead on this, which is typically what's done in these type of situations. But as Lucy said, there are lots of other geologists and scientists who can help out. They are actually setting up a command or coordination center out in the field so that people know where to go. They're not stepping on each other's toes. They can use their resources as best as possible, or most efficiently as possible.
There used to be a time when it was more chaotic. We now usually try to coordinate. We have set up a clearinghouse, and we're gradually starting to, even the geologists come into the 21st century and start having apps to be able to share the information. So each earthquake, we get a little farther down that digital spectrum.
About the depth of the earthquake again, you said it was perhaps 10 miles deep. Does that define the intensity at all?
No. So that's just where it started. And as I mentioned just a couple minutes ago, many times the epicenter or the hypocenter, which is the location of depth, may have a small amount of slip relative to the other parts of the fault. As the rupture propagates out across that fault, it can grow. You can get much larger displacements and much greater release of energy.
And this picture is proof that the fault ruptured all the way up to the surface.
And Lucy, you mentioned earlier that a 5+ was a certainty for the rest of the time there. Have those percentages changed at all in the last 20 minutes?
No.
Doctor, when you talk about this being a 7.1 there, what is it that we're feeling in LA, kind of roughly, as far as
the magnitude? It does not depend on location. It is a 7.1 period. There's no location adapted to that. To describe what we feel, we talk about intensity. And it looks like it was intensity 3 to 4 in the Los Angeles area, depending on exactly where you were.
For those tuning in at 11 o'clock, so the aftershock sequence is not a surprise. It's vigorous, but it's in line with what you've seen before. Not surprised with a 7.1, maybe not anticipating it, but that's also within the ballpark.
In California, Southern California would expect to have a magnitude 7 once every 15 or 20 years. The last one was 20 years ago. We would expect to have a 6 every 3 years or so, and the bigger surprise is that we've gone 20 years without a 6. This is more, think of this as a return to what California is supposed to be doing, rather than really that the last 20 years was the standard. Also, this part of California, the Owens Valley, starting from here up through to Mammoth and getting up towards Reno, is characterized by these types of earthquakes. There have been multiple sequences with many with magnitude 7s and many large earthquakes within the sequences with these large, very active aftershock sequences. So this is far from unusual for this area.
Right, and just to point out, just to follow along with, excuse me, just to follow along what Dr. Jones was saying. In 1876, we had an earthquake just to the north of here, the Owens, 1872, Owens Valley earthquake, magnitude estimated 7.5 to 8, so very large earthquake. Historically, maybe about 50 miles north of where this activity is occurring. So it's not in the historical record. This level of activity is not unprecedented.
Okay, when we talk about these probabilities of earthquakes, 5% is the generic number. That's on average over the whole area. The ability to have what you're going to be triggering, if we're seeing a lot of aftershocks, the numbers go up a bit just because when you have a lot of earthquakes, you tend to have a lot of earthquakes. This is an active sequence, therefore the chance of an aftershock that's bigger than the main shock goes up with the overall number. So this is probably, and actually this was a 7.1. A 7.0 would technically still be an aftershock. And when we give you that 1 in 10 number, it does include that possibility as well.
So anyway, I apologize. I cut you off. Do you want to? Okay.
No, that was it. That was what
I know that that's a road, but can you give a more specific locator of where that is?
I apologize. I don't have a geo-reference on that. It is southwest of Trona along Highway 178. And I have received word that Caltrans has closed the highway. Obviously, they need to do repairs. So this is between Ridgecrest and Trona along Highway 178.
And how close would it be to here?
So as far as we can tell, we just have we got a message. This is just a text message from a geologist in the U.S. Geological Survey, and he said southwest of Trona on Highway 178. Rob is marking Highway 178, and so because we have that fault structure, we also can see its right lateral motion, so we're pretty sure it's on the northwest fault, not on the southwest trending fault. The southwest trending fault is left lateral.
Can you give us a brief description of what the geologists actually do when they're out there? They're obviously out there to collect data, but what does that look like?
They're going out, they will take pictures and share them with us, and then they document at this particular location, and they measured it. This is about 30 centimeters of slip, which is about 1 foot total offset along this. And that's one of the important pieces that will be put together, is what's the offset as a function going down the fault.
And they actually have very sophisticated equipment where they can, okay, 4.5, where they can actually measure in great detail. They take optical images or radar images of these structures, and then they can actually digitize that and get very precise three-dimensional view of what the deformation was like. So there's going to be a wealth of data that we'll be able to look at and get a very detailed picture of what the rupture was looking like.
What would your questions be about this?
My questions? Well, oh, wow.
Curious about that.
Yeah, so there's actually a number of questions in terms of the ground motions that are radiated from faults. As faults break to the surface like this, there's actually indications that the ground motions are lower than they might be expected from ruptures that are buried. If you remember Dr. Jones talking about the Northridge earthquake, that was a buried fault, and it was very energetic. Even though the magnitude was 6.7, it was incredibly strong shaking. This earthquake...
Portable?
Hold on, everybody. Our mics are open now, so we are dealing with this quake for right now. So that's more information. They've been able to crunch some more numbers
and talk about
the
that we had yesterday,
probability.
That's also the case.
What
it looks
they're
like
learning
it broke
about this
up
quake.
to the surface, and the ground motions were a little bit lower than what might be expected for the average 6.4 earthquake. Now, those are just preliminary assessments, but that's very important if we can understand that and then be able to better forecast what might happen in the next earthquake.
And there's the other unusual point. It looks like, at least on the 6.4, the rupture moved down the fault a little more slowly than average. And maybe that contributes to the lower ground motions rather than breaking through. And that's, so we don't know yet for the 7.1 how fast it ruptured down the fault. And that'll help us, I think, address some of those pictures. And if we're lucky, we'll have a different rupture propagation speed between the two events, and then we can compare how the ground motions look. So that would be the type of thing.
Standing right there, would it appear to be opening up as one crack right away, or would you actually see it move?
We think you see it move.
Yeah, and there's actually kind of two different or two comparable things that happen. One is the rupture, which starts at the hypocenter and goes out across the fault, and it's going very fast.
2 miles a second.
Yeah, and so if you were standing right next to the fault, you would see something that kind of went from that horizon, zoom, over to the other horizon. The second thing that's happening is that the fault is actually moving side to side. Okay, so that rupture would go along, that's like a zipper. And then the fault would be going about a couple feet, maybe 3 feet per second, sliding by. So you would see a zip, and then the two sides of the fault you could actually see slide by. It may take 2 or 3 seconds for that to happen.
Last question. Have you ever seen these cracks big enough for a person to fall in?
Oh, no, it's not opening up.
Right. If the fault could open up, you will not have an earthquake. You slip on the fault and produce shaking, just like snapping your fingers makes the air vibrate. Try snapping your fingers with it opened up. You don't make any waves. If the fault opened, there'd be no waves coming off of it.
Yeah, there are a couple of reports where people have actually, witnessed the fault move. Very dramatic. Obviously, very strong shaking too. You're going to be having difficulty standing up and so forth. Anyway, so last question.
If you gave an estimate of the likelihood of another quake above a 7, do you also have an estimate of another quake happening that's greater than this 7.1?
That's just a few percent lower because greater than 7 includes everything that's bigger. It's on the order of 8 or 9%.
So the people in Ridgecrest obviously are going to be feeling this for some time, but people down here are going to be feeling some sizable aftershocks.
There's the potential, all the ones that are definitely above 5, the 5.1s, 5.2s, 5.3s, they seem to be felt if you're sitting quietly in Los Angeles. And we're pretty certain we're going to have more of that size somewhere over the next few days.
Lucy, you said the 6.4 quake and its aftershocks were on a southwestern type of motion. These are going northwestern. Would you expect the rest of the aftershocks to be in a northwestern direction?
They'll be on both structures, probably.
Will you all be back here tomorrow morning?
Not me.
Okay.
Dr. Graves, thank you.
I believe there will this will be open. Somebody will be here.
Yeah.
11 o'clock.
11 o'clock tomorrow.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
All right, in time for the next quake, right?
Yeah, they're tired. They've been working after yesterday, too, so it's been a long 2 days. Now, we do have some updated information from Ridgecrest. This is from the police chief there. More than 13,000 people without power right now. They did have 2 structure fires. Those have been contained. PG&E says that gas leaks are under control. They're focusing on the residential reported gas leaks, and officials were able to shut off a lot of those gas valves. They did a flyover 2 units, and they found no major road damage was seen. No additional injuries reported as of the most recent report. But we did see damage on State Route 178. Significant reports of damage there.
It's closed between Ridgecrest and Trona.
Right, and half of the road about 2 feet, higher than the other.
A foot displacement was what we were just told, and you can expect that being that close to the epicenter.
And drivers cautioned to be careful in that area, obviously.
Right. So, yeah, that's what we're seeing now.